whatever it takes. And it's interesting you referred to my motorcycle adventure on a children's motorcycle. In fact, I needed an adventure of a new kind in 2020 and signed up with a friend to go to Mongolia and race children's motorcycles, 49cc motorcycles for 10 days across Mongolia. And the company that organized it, they know how to define adventure. It's because they didn't even tell us where we were going to start or where we were going to end. So we didn't even have the opportunity to do, how guides were always like looking at maps and doing tour planning and looking at like shortcuts and ways that we can maximize number of summits or whatever. None of that. We had paper maps. They told us where we were going to start and where we were going to finish literally the day we got on the plane to go to Mongolia, which is no easy place to get to. And then they bust us out to the world's tallest statue of Genghis Khan. And we started there. They introduced
as you do, as one does.
That's right. Introduced us to our little mini motos and told us where the finish line was. And of course, they expect you're going to run out of gas. You don't speak the language, you're going to get lost, and you have to carry everything that you need for 10 days on a 40cc motorcycle.
Oh, what's up, guys? Welcome to All Aspects. This is a podcast where we explore, discuss, celebrate adventure culture and outdoor lifestyle. It's our mission to educate and inform and entertain our fellow adventurers about the inherent risks that surround us every time we go play in the backcountry, and to give you the tools and education to do the things that you love the most in the safest way possible. All Aspects is brought to you by AspectAvy. AspectAvy is on a mission to save lives by making avalanche safety simple. It is the only app that has built-in dynamic slope angle shading to show you exactly which areas are likely to trigger that day, allowing you to spend more time enjoying your backcountry adventure every time you go out. With a suite of built-in tools like forecast verification, a 3-axis slope meter tool, tour tracker, and more, AspectAvy is the new safety standard for avalanche risk management. Remember, there are dozens of apps that get you into the backcountry, but there's only one that's designed to bring you home, and that's AspectAvy. Go to AspectAvy.com to learn more or download the app to start your 30-day free trial. Hey, thanks AspectAvy for sponsoring the podcast, and thank you all for tuning in. All right, let's get to it.
Jeff, you're looking extra fast today, and we have a very special guest, which is Angela Hawse.
She's looking very smart today.
Before we go into all your credentials, Angela, I usually like to start these off with just a ridiculous fun fact, kind of throw everyone off beat and just see where we all go. So this one's a two-parter, so buckle up, kids. Do you guys know how much a male African elephant weighs?
1 to 2 tons.
3 to 4 tons.
Okay, Angela, you're closer. It's 7 tons.
Metric tons.
Get out of here, Jeff. Get out of here with that. No way.
We're just talking about snow stuff. It's all metric.
I haven't even been to Africa yet.
We're talking. What? Ditto. Okay, wait. This is the second part to this fact.
Been to.
Dave's been on safari.
Yeah, okay. Don't hold it against me. Okay. So a male African elephant weighs roughly 7 tons.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Metric or imperial?
Imperial.
Okay.
LBS, baby. So now knowing that, how many elephants does it take to weigh as much as a U.S. aircraft carrier?
1 million.
Okay, it's lower than that. So a U.S. aircraft carrier weighs 100,000 tons.
I was told there'd be no math on this podcast.
Yes, I was told there would be straightforward questions.
An elephant weighing in at 7 tons means that it's roughly
pounds.
Roughly,
for you listeners at home.
Here, I got this right. I got it written down. I was prepared. 14,285 elephants equal 1 aircraft carrier. Hard-hitting stuff.
But would they fit?
Noah's Ark kind of thing?
I don't think they'd fit in that aircraft carrier.
That's a good point. Imagine all the poo. All right. Well, Now that we got that one going out of the way,
Good little icebreaker.
Jeff, do you want to introduce Angela since you guys go way back and you want to speak her praises?
Sure. It's pretty exhaustive. Her resume is makes me feel like a slacker, I got to say. But in short, she's just stepped down from serving her term as president of the American Mountain Guides Association. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the second IFMGA guide as a woman, right?
Yes, that's
Yep.
correct.
Kathy Cosley, Houston. Yep.
I know
And
Margaret Wheeler.
oh,
was
okay.
the
So you're
first
three.
president. Yes.
Oh,
No.
yeah, and then the second president. Then the second president. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And historically, guide associations have been just male, and so I think it speaks volumes that
Right.
that you were chosen to lead a vastly male dominant organization that's changed and evolved over time, and we can get into that a little bit more. But you're also a technical delegate. You're on the technical committee for the AMGA, setting the technical standards of, hey, this is how we're going to train guides, this is the official party line, but also for the IFMGA, correct?
That's correct. I'm the vice president of the technical commission of the IFMGA.
You're shaking up the old boys club, Angela.
I am doing my best. Seems to be my life's mission, to jump in there with both feet.
Yep. And you've been involved with all kinds of other, I guess we could call them passion projects as well. And it seems like the theme that I see in your work, in your CV, is that you're always giving back to the mountain community. And I thought that was really cool. And I'd like to follow up with that later. We'll put a pin in that and hear about some of your passion projects that you've been involved with and ways you give back to the mountains and to the mountain communities. But then you're also on the instructor team for the AMJ. So you train and examine new guides. Right. And what's your favorite color?
Ooh, boy, you just threw that right out there. I'm going to say yellow.
Oh,
I love the sun.
All right.
Well, you have a very sunny disposition, that's for sure. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to your personality is that you're incredibly curious and relentless and a real hard worker as well. And I'm like, ooh, I want some of that to rub off on me. And it makes for very interesting discussion. So we've loosely scripted this one, but I'm really curious to see where we go and where we end up. In short, to wrap up, like there's not too many people that line up with your amount of experience, your certifications, and the way you also give back to the mountain community, because you also teach avalanche classes on the rec level, but more now on the pro level. So you're the pros pro teaching them, the super expert. And
actually, I've never taught in the rec program. I've always been just a practitioner. And then when the pro programs rolled out, it was a good fit for me because I had been working in all the capacities of forecaster, backcountry ski
guide, operation,
guide,
patrol,
all that. Mm-hmm. But I've never taught the rec programs, which I might evolve into doing that. It seems like another great way to give back.
Yeah, because it's interesting. There's all these spokes of the wheel coming off the avalanche hub, and I thought that was really illuminating for me as mountain guides we're trying to avoid, whereas ski patrollers were trying to hunt them and kick them off to make it safe for the public. And then heli guiding is kind of an interesting mix where we have explosives, but we can't mitigate as much as, say, ski patrol can. And so we're doing a combination of hunting them and avoiding them with clients at the same, maybe on the same day. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you very much for that.
Back to you, Dave.
Intro. That was very thorough. I wanted to, since we were kind of talking about the guide thing, Angela, is it true that you're one of only 11 women to have the IFMGA certification?
No. There's
really?
more. Yes, okay. There's 15.
Was that just when you got it?
I was the 6th woman in the U.S. And now there's 15 women that have been trained certified by the AMGA in the U.S. And we don't have exact numbers from the IFMGA, but it's likely that there's, well over like a couple hundred women that are certified internationally out of 7,000. got
Gotcha.
7,000 guides total. So it's
For-
still very, very much a minority. In the U.S., we have
Yeah.
now we've just recently certified our 200th IFMGA mountain guide, which is huge.
Wow. Nice. So this was actually kind of fun because you and I met each other just filming, doing some videos for YouTube, basically. And my only prerequisite to knowing you was just what Jeff told me. It was like, you're the president of the American Mountain Guide Association and you're a badass. Like, that was it. And so then, like,
What do you need?
we meet up, we hang out, we shoot some videos. Like, we had a lot of fun. It was a fun day. And then
It was cold.
it was cool that you agreed to come and do this because I got to kind of go and like look into you and kind of like read through all your accomplishments. And I listened to the Blister podcast you did back in
nice.
2019. And it's like such a classic. I feel like this happens a lot in the ski world. That's all I have exposure to, but where you're just sort of hanging out with someone. And then the more you start learning about them, you're like, whoa, wow. Like that person is so unassuming and chill. And then they just have this like this awesome accomplishments list. So this was like kind of a pleasure to go through and learn a little more about you in this way. And now I get to kind of like talk to you about some of this stuff.
Oh, I'm flattered. All that stuff that's all what I've done, but that's not who I am, So when I'm with people like you and Jeff hanging out, I'm just me. And all that stuff is my experience. And for some reason, I've been relentlessly driven to just go on from one thing to the next. And I've enjoyed it throughout and learned a ton, but I don't really define myself by the things I've done. It's more just being me.
Well, I feel like that's a very humble and admirable way to go through life, to be honest. And it's probably why you're so fun to hang out with, because you're not all, look at me.
It's probably why I'm still alive, too.
The mountains have a way of serving up that dose of humble pie on a regular basis.
That's right. Exactly.
Angela, I got to say that the inner Terry Gross in me is like chewing through my tongue to like not ask you, so how would you describe yourself? Like, let's take away all the accolades, all the achievements, all the certifications. Who is Angela Hawse? Or, how do you see yourself?
Well, I have a name. That's my name, Angela Hawse. But who I am is someone who has gone through life with struggles like everyone else and has learned from them. And I'm trying to get back to that inner child that was the perfect semblance of me. And through all these experiences, I get closer to that because I begin to realize that I'm just like everybody else, and we're all connected in that special way. And so more than I did like the last 40, 50 years, I'm just trying to just be as present as possible and be totally comfortable in my own skin and walk my talk as much as possible. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm not really trying, I'm just doing it.
I mean, you spent so much time in the mountains. Is that still your happy place? You're still your safe place, like where you go out and it's like,
oh yeah,
clear your head.
it's like yesterday I just climbed up Red 3 with a ski partner and just had amazing turns, a little bit rocky on the way down. We chose the most conservative line down, and we checked out the snowpack on the way up and listened to all the signs and used AspectAvy, which I'm really trusting to be a good partner in the mountains as well. And it was a beautiful day. It was supposed to be like, 20 below wind chill, but there wasn't a breath of wind. We were on the summit. It was like blue, and unbelievably, we haven't had much wind effect with the last couple storms. So it's just finally a blanket of snow everywhere, and just another beautiful day in the mountains. Yeah, so that's my happy place. And skiing has definitely become my passion sport, and something that I wish I could do it all year round.
Is that
you had?
Oh, Jeff, you go.
All right. Sorry to step on your toes, Dave, but
Oh, you're good.
yeah, Angela, you've had adventures all over the world, and I loved hearing about your motorcycle trip through Mongolia, and big Himalayan peaks, and like all over the place, and for decades and decades. What does adventure mean to you? What do you seek when you're going on an adventure?
Yeah, every day's an adventure, really. But when I'm like going on a adventure,
Or
um,
even just yesterday's adventure, because you
yeah,
said
even
it's
just
supposed to
yesterday,
be like this, but it's always a little different, and you have to adapt.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, for me, an adventure is like just going out and having a bit of a plan, but just being open to all the things that emerge along the way that influence the decisions and the direction that I go with whatever it takes. And it's interesting you referred to my motorcycle adventure on a children's motorcycle. In fact, I needed an adventure of a new kind in 2020 and signed up with a friend to go to Mongolia and race children's motorcycles, 49cc motorcycles for 10 days across Mongolia. And the company that organized it, they know how to define adventure. It's because they didn't even tell us where we were going to start or where
Oh,
we were going to end. So we didn't even have the opportunity to do, how guides were always like
yeah.
looking at maps and doing tour planning and looking at like shortcuts and ways that we can maximize number of summits or whatever. None of that. We had paper maps. They told us where we were going to start and where we were going to finish literally the day we got on the plane to go to Mongolia, which is no easy place to get to. And then they bust us out to the world's tallest statue of Genghis Khan, and we started there. They introduced
As you
us to our
do,
little.
as one does.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Good
Introduced us
starting
to our
point.
little mini motos and told us where the finish line was. And of course, they expect you're going to run out of gas. You don't speak the language. You're going to get lost, and you have to carry everything that you need for 10 days on a 40cc motorcycle. So for me, I was like the perfect size. I'm small. My partner's small. You guys would be a little bit big, but there were guys on these bikes that were very large. And it was such an exercise in problem solving for everybody, and everybody handled it differently. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about adventure is it's like you're problem solving and thinking on your feet, and your goal is either the summit. My goal is always coming home, so the summit isn't the main goal.
Mm.
And making decisions along the way that maximize your fun and maximize your ability to return, maximize your risk tolerance, and maximize your ability to problem solve to manage risk along the way. So I guess for me, adventure is having fun in a new place, doing something that's challenging. That is always part of it. And then engaging fully in the decision making process with whoever I'm doing it with,
Mm.
and also with the goal of coming back friends, because
Yeah.
that in intense adventures, that's not always the easiest thing to do if you're in a tent with someone for 10 days in a storm. And it's all about attitude for adventure. And any day can be seen as an adventure. And I think adventure has a connotation of like extreme risk or challenging someone to their ultimate potential. But for me, adventure is just exploring the world and my interaction with it in a way that's fun.
I liked how you said staying open to the possibilities. I was like, oh, that resonates really strongly when you said that. My energy perked right up. I was like, ooh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Like yesterday,
agreed.
skiing up, we like skinned across all these rocks. We were on southerly facing slopes that we knew were really shallow, and we didn't have an old snow problem there. And we're like, how are we going to ski down? It's like, I was open to the possibility of finding a safe way down, but it didn't look very promising on the way up. And then that unfolded on the way down. We were able to keep our skis on the entire way down
Yeah.
from the summit. We hit a few rocks, but not so bad. But if we would have looked at that going across and not seen that opportunity, probably would have just turned around. It's like, this isn't going to be fun at all, because there was considerable elevation with rocks.
Sometimes you have to put yourselves in a position to get lucky. And
That's right.
well, we might be walking back down this. That might be how it is, but
that's right.
Let's go take a look. Yeah.
That's okay too.
I love the idea of like the openness. To me, that's a huge part of it, because like, as a perfect example, the first time I met Banks, he called me out of the blue. Like, a friend of mine was like, hey, we need to get more B-roll for this project they were working on. And it's the middle of the summer. And like, he's like, here's this guy's number. He's a mountain guide. He lives in Crested Butte. And I call him, and the first he's like, do you have ice climbing gear? And I was like, no. Also, it's June. Like, what are you talking about, mate? And then he was like, okay, that's cool, but you got ski stuff? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, sweet, we'll see you tomorrow. And then I was just like, well, dude, what am I getting into right now? Like, we need ice climbing gear in the middle of summer. But just sort of that mentality of being like, well, it'll probably be fun. If, nothing else, it'll be a good story. And, I'm not someone who at this point in my life wants to be taking crazy risk, but that doesn't mean I can't still have like ridiculous fun going and doing stuff that I'm not sure how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, I don't know.
Well,
that's
so
like
what was
spirit.
the adventure? I mean, that sounds, you can't just like leave us hanging like that.
Oh, that was the I think you probably saw it. It was the video that we did where Jeff was skiing down the Treasury chutes. It's like, I just went up and, Jeff, what was that called?
So some people call them the twin couloirs of Treasury. They go into North Pole Basin. So you start at 13,000 feet, and it's often great skiing in June, July, maybe even August in some years. And so I think we were sometime in July maybe. And I was like, Dave, you don't want to fall because you may not be coming back if you do. You sure you're okay on this? And Dave just side slipped it with shooting the video while I was skiing it. And I was like, he'll be just fine. But then,
no, I took turns. I have GoPro footage of it.
And it's a measured 50 degrees as well with a dog leg. So it's narrow. It's just enough to turn, but it's spicy and rewarding, but not something you would usually do for a first date as a tour. and certainly not, filming the guy skiing ahead of you as you slide down behind. And then Dave was super chill on the down, but he's like, hey, I think I'd like a rope for the up because I haven't really done any cramponing. And I was like, yeah, of course, no problem. We're a team.
And all I had was my like
alpine boots.
El Moro Dalbellas, or just no flex in them. So there's hiking up like this. I was like, kept getting pushed back.
Frankenstein.
It's like, Jeff, help.
But we had thought about that, and we brought in a little bit of rope and had a crampon, so worked out.
Always prepared.
Yeah, usually. I wouldn't say always, but usually. Hey, should we segue into your adventures in the avalanche world? And you got a Pro 2 you're teaching coming up.
Yeah.
And so what's a Pro 2 for? Who's it targeted at? And what skills are they going to get in that course?
Pro 2 is the highest level training you can get in the US currently. And this is targeted towards folks that are transitioning and aspire to be leaders in their operations. It's very geared towards operational forecasting and operational risk management in the context of working in avalanche terrain. So our typical students are ski patrollers, backcountry ski guides, avalanche forecasters. We've had event managers for free ride skiing competitions. And what else? Yeah, heli forecasters, like mechanized operations. So it's an amazing course because the diversity of the clients, of the students, really lends to the learning that goes on. It's not just from the instructors, but the sharing of all the students, because they get in pods, small working groups, and their challenges for the program are developing a forecast, baseline forecast based on the snowpack that we're working in, which is always interesting here in the North San Juans.
Yeah.
And this is for the Silverton Avalanche School, just a little bit south of where I live here. And in their small pods, they're given a different challenge each day. So one challenge will be develop an operation for a risk management plan and a forecasting plan for a backcountry ski operation. And they have a terrain envelope in which they're assigned, which has numerous different avalanche paths and some very moderate, some very extreme terrain. And we go out into that terrain and figure out where's the up track, where's the safe go-to up track. How can you guide this terrain in any condition, even in high avalanche danger? Can you
that's cool.
Can you produce a day of guided skiing here? And then, looking at where runs are going to be, and looking at the 8th scale, the avalanche terrain exposure scale, and putting the avalanche problems into the terrain that are specific to, if I have an old snow problem, a persistent slab problem, this is generally in the terrain where I'm going to find that consistently. And that's pretty easy in the San Juans, because northerly, east and west aspects traditionally host a persistent slab problem, sometimes throughout the entire year if we don't have much snow depth. Yeah. And then we do another operation, which is looking at a highway transportation corridor for a mine. And they have to look at how they're going to mitigate and manage mine workers going in on a daily basis, many shifts, many times a day, how they're going to keep that road and the exposure to avalanche hazard manageable. And here we're getting more into the explosives they might use, the remote avalanche control systems and where they might place those in the terrain, and then what a snow safety plan will look like for that operation. And then the next operation is developing a ski area. And so now they have like 3 lifts that they can put in the terrain. So they've got fixed infrastructure that's exposed to avalanche hazard, and they have to have mitigation protocols. They have to have closure boundaries for the ski area. They have to have like a protocol for snow safety and know where to target specific problems given in a storm or given a persistent slab or wind slab problem, and then develop a treatment plan for that. And then the last exercise is they've evolved to be consultants. So now they go in and they review their peers' operations, and they provide feedback on how they think they did. And so it's a really great course for folks that, like us, love snow, love managing the risk of avalanche hazard and exposure, and are looking to have a career in that, because there's a lot of different avenues that you can take as a snow safety professional beyond guiding that we're familiar with, that any infrastructure that's built in avalanche terrain requires avalanche consultants to go in and design avalanche atlases, mitigation plans, things like that. So it's a great program. It's I get to work with the highest level people in their careers already that are developing to be leaders. And the avalanche industry, as you two well know, has changed significantly over the years in many ways, thanks to the Canadians and a framework called the Conceptual Model of Avalanche Hazard that gives us a risk management decision-making tool to work through the steps before we actually get even into the terrain, so we make good decisions while we're in a safe place and we're thinking soundly before we go out there. And obviously we can change our plan, but only so far.
Yeah. I love that idea of, hey, most of the risk management happens at home when we're warm, dry, well-fed, and we can have a conversation that's not in a blizzard, and we can screen out most of the risk. I think that's a big secret or misconception, that we are not shooting from the hip as guides when we're on the mountain. A lot of it is chess, and it's 3D chess mapped out the night before, the morning of, and then the last little bit, just the tip of the iceberg, happens in the field.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a
recreational.
super cool
Anyway.
exercise to go through, and like those different. Like that
It's
sounds
so great,
really creative and also
yeah,
super collaborative.
that's
Yeah.
right. Well, when I took my Canadian level 2, which is a little bit, it's a longer program than the one that we offer here in the States. One of the coolest exercises, because a lot of this evolves around leadership, teamwork, communication, right? And as people who have evolved in our careers, oftentimes we're kind of set in our ways. We are a little bit opinionated sometimes. And oftentimes people don't speak up their opinions in a group. And so looking at communication and bias and the way that we work as teams and the way that leaders encourage their teams to operate was really cool in the Canadian model, because one of our exercises was looking at case studies, but we had different roles. So one would be the devil's advocate, and one would be, the person that's like uber stoked, that is overconfident. One would be the old crusty person that's been there forever. Yeah, exactly. The one would be the newcomer who's hesitant to speak up. And
Yeah.
we would have these sticky notes. And so each exercise, we would play a different role, which was absolutely awesome to just think in that way, because we don't often think outside the box of our own head and communicate how we would expect that person to communicate. And it really helped bring out biases, and it helped us see how everybody's opinion is valued in that process, that communication process, when you're making decisions before you go out into the field. And it was a super cool exercise.
Wait, I have a question. So when you're doing these like hypothetical, you said like we have to plan out like a safety in and out route for a mine or something like that. Like, are they based off of real life locations, or is it just
These are
totally?
based. We have so many mines here in the San Juans, and we also have a lot of backcountry ski guided terrain. Not so much for the mechanized. Like our operation area is not too far away from Silverton Mountain, which has, that's mechanical ops. They have one lift, and heli ops. So it's pretty realistic, and the mines that we're forecasting for, there's actually mines at the head of all these valleys that are defunct. They've long since gone away, but the actual physical structures and the roads to them are still in existence. So that makes it with a lot of avalanche exposure. So it's really an ideal place for this program.
It'd be funny to tell students that's why they went defunct, because they got avalanched and wiped out their operations.
It could be true. Those guys were amazingly bold. They would
out there.
Their way of mitigation would be tunneling through avalanche debris, which then they completely avoided the avalanche.
Oh,
They would just go under the tunnel and take their mule trains. And there's so many cool photographs and stories from the mines along the Highway 550 here. It's just phenomenal. They were so bold.
Dude, seriously, I just remember, like, I grew up in Durango, but like some of the mines you come across, or like you wouldn't even know you're by a mine, and then all of a sudden you're just like, wait, is that a freaking mine? Like,
they're everywhere.
How did they get
everywhere.
here?
They're everywhere.
Is it in Ouray? There's like a ladder that's just like up on the cliff.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're sitting in the hot springs, Jeff, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but you look like, there's like, I don't know what, 800-foot cliff above you.
Yeah.
And 200 feet up the 800-foot cliff, there's just a wooden ladder going up another like 150-foot stretch of it. And it really puts into perspective, you're like, oh my God, these people.
Yeah, their appetite for risk. Wow.
Their Tuesdays were the craziest thing that we've ever done.
So Angela, you've been grappling with risk for decades now in the outdoor industry. And, what you're describing is so far removed from what the average person could ever even imagine. And all these different ways that avalanche professionals could implement a risk management program. How has your thinking of risk evolved over the years, and since you've been working as a mountain guide?
Well, it's evolved significantly, having more of a process to make decisions with. And, that's really only been in the last 15 years. Previously, it was almost all either acceptance or avoidance, which was mostly avoidance. And I think that's why I'm still here, is because, I have listened to my gut throughout my life. And that is not a reliable way to go about business when you're in the mountains, but it has always worked for me. But I've always looked at mountains and the risk that I've been exposed to through learning as much as I can from the experts. And from a very young age, I took my first avalanche course on Red Mountain Pass.
Oh, wow. It's coming full circle.
1983 with Rod Newcomb and Don Bachman, and stayed at the St. Paul Lodge, and was a very green Prescott College student on telemark skis. None of us could ski.
Yeah.
And I was hooked. Those two really clearly were like snow gurus, and we just looked up to them like they knew everything there was to know about moving through the mountains. And there was so much I didn't know. I didn't even know what questions to ask at that point. But I fell in love with this place and a healthy respect for it, and took a Pro 2 years later, and then just started working. And it was really through the work opportunities that I had that my relationship to risk emerged, through the training, working for Outward Bound, working for Prescott College. I used to teach whitewater kayaking programs, which were for Prescott College, that were probably the riskiest thing I ever did. And I think that's why I got really into rock climbing, because I realized if I had a rope, I could be much more in control rather than just yelling at people, telling them what to do.
When they're underwater.
When they're underwater, stuck on a rock, like, oh my goodness. So most of my experience with risk and my learning has come through working for programs that provide great trainings and a solid framework around how to move with a group through the mountains. And now that's evolved to me being a trainer. So it's been like this theme of train the trainer, and now I'm the trainer that's training the trainers. And it's been great. And I have utmost respect for all my climbing partners and skiing partners that have not approached it from an educational place. And I think I'm just inherently curious, and I've always valued education. So I pursued kind of that direction to learn how to move about in the mountains. And my friends that haven't, they've had more of the school of hard knocks, which I've certainly had plenty of as well. But they approach risk very differently, which I think is highly valuable when I'm out in the mountains with them, and we can have discussions on what they're seeing and why they think we should go up there or we shouldn't. And it leads to really interesting conversations that are often different than I have when I'm with pros.
Can we dive in to something you said that I perked up at, where you said it was contradictory, but I think we can explain it to the audience, where you were talking about your gut and risk. And
don't get Jeff going about the gut.
Well, if we take a high level view, like neuroscience has no idea where the seat of consciousness is. And a lot of folks are like, it might as well be the gut as well as the brain. Yeah. And so when we talk about my gut felt bad, I don't like this. How has your gut served you? And when would you listen to your gut? And when would you be like, I think my gut just wants to ski steep powder today? How do you differentiate that? How has your gut served you well to keep you alive? How does your gut talk to you when your conscious brain might not be as caught up to your gut?
Yeah, that's a really hard one to nail down, hard one to describe, because it's a feeling and it's a knowing at the same time. And there's days where I don't even leave the house. I have a plan to go, and I just I wake up and I have like spidey senses that are just like, ooh, something just doesn't feel right about today. And maybe it's the roads, or maybe it's something that happened yesterday in the mountains that didn't sit well with me. but there's just that thing that I've come more to listen to when it comes across. It just is a fleeting thing. It's not up in here, which is super interesting, and I find I have to override my cognitive thinking to really start to listen to it. And sometimes, like when I'm actually in the moment and my gut speaks to me and my spidey senses perk up, it is a feeling right in my gut. Like it's literally kind of like that constriction, a bit of butterflies, like uncertainty. And the more the more I listen to that, the more I've trusted it. And I think it's something that is very easy to discount because we're so thought oriented. We're so like, we think in our brains, and there's so many stories going on then there all the time, that it's difficult to override it. But I've begun to trust it more, that it is something that I really pay attention to. There was another part to your question there.
I would say something to this also, though, and correct me if I'm wrong. You said something that I think is key to listening to your gut in the right way, which is you have a healthy respect for the mountains.
Yes.
Which I think that actually probably can allow you to listen to your gut, because you have that baseline of like, hey, at the end of the day, like I am getting to play here.
That's right.
Like I have no power over what happens here. And so like, I think if maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like if you're kind of approaching what you do from a fundamental level of like that mindset, then when you do have like the bad vibe or whatever, I think it's probably easier to identify or at least recognize when it's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I am conservative, so I don't often put myself into positions where I'm going to all of a sudden have to really shift gears quickly. The places that I seem to get into trouble, and in avalanche terrain, I'm very conservative. My home snowpack is here in the North San Juans, which is one of the most hazardous snowpacks in the world, because it's shallow, it's high elevation. We get a lot of sun, which brings in a lot of solar radiation. And because it's so high and clear, we have very cold temperatures at night, which further deteriorates our meek snowpack as it is. And learning in this snowpack has given me tremendous healthy respect for the mountains, for sure. It's just something that, and if you don't mind, if I go on a little bit of a tangent here.
That's what this is all about.
That's all we're doing here. We don't know. We got no plan.
Keep in mind, Angela, you know what the world really needs is two middle-aged white guys talking on a podcast right now. That's what they really need. That's what they're clamoring for. So by all means, digress as much as you want.
Oh, no.
Jeff and I are really saving the world.
Yesterday, so great day up on Red. Didn't have any spidey senses. Like it just was a wonderful day. Coming down, we observed a large avalanche, a size 2, that was skier triggered. We stopped on Highway 550, pulled off the road, had a spotting scope, looked at it. It was on the northwest face of Red 3, which is rowdy terrain. And we looked across at that and could see tracks going in to it. And it looked very fresh. And with further help with the scope, we were far enough away that like by the time we would have got there, if someone was buried, there was no way that we were going to help. So we actually ended up driving down and calling the sheriff to make sure that they were aware of it, because we did see tracks going in. We couldn't see tracks from our vantage point going out, and we didn't know how many people were involved, if they had done 2 laps or if it was a larger party, maybe a 4 or 5. So anyway, I just had an awful gut feeling. And when we saw that and saw the tracks going into it, and it just, fortunately, everybody's okay. They deployed they both had airbags. It was a party of 2. They both had airbags, and they did skier trigger it, a rider trigger it, and they were buried just very shallowly and able to dig themselves out without injury and self-extricate. So that was a happy ending. And unfortunately, in Crested Butte, there was a fatality yesterday that was a very sad, tragic event. And my condolences to the family and friends of all involved there. So this gut feeling I had, it just was really illuminated, especially going into teaching a Pro 2. I'm always thinking about risk tolerance and how different we all look at risk and how we accept risk at different levels, just inherently as who we are and how we approach the mountains and how we see things and interact in terrain. And it just is so fascinating for me how some individuals will accept a much higher level of risk, and I'm always curious to understand the thinking behind that, why they accept that, and do they feel like the modern equipment that they're able to deploy an airbag, that improves their chances of survival and that makes it acceptable? Or are they is there pressure from social media that looking for the nice shot because everybody's posting powder pictures now, and this
Do it for the
lights
gram
on this really nicely, or this is a new ski partner and I really want to make sure that I can ski with this person a lot because I like the lines that they're skiing. I mean, there's so many different factors there. And when we dive into this training for the Pro 2, we look at the operational risk tolerance, the operational risk band. And that's something that we all have in a working place in avalanche terrain. It's like, what are our margins and how big of an avalanche can we produce? And when you're heli skiing, your margins are going to be much greater than they would when you're backcountry ski touring because you have the helicopter as a backup. Every guide's got a radio, everyone's wearing an airbag, you've got instant action with the helicopter. Got explosives to come to the rescue. So, getting into bigger terrain is more acceptable.
I'm sorry. Have you ever used explosives on a rescue? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, wait. I have this question too. I was like sitting here like, how does that work?
You can test the slope before, and you could keep testing it and mitigating throughout the season. Yeah.
You're like, okay, we found him. Go 10 meters that way, put a charge in the ground, break it up.
Yeah. It's just fascinating, and I just we have a lot more popularity amongst backcountry skiing everywhere, which is great that people are getting out and enjoying the mountains. And it's amazing what we can get away with. And I just really appreciate the tools that you two are bringing to the community with some processes for managing risk in avalanche terrain that pros have been using for a while now. It's a different way of using the tools, but it's the same mindset of having a framework that's based on some data and your actual current observations and very good mapping tools to help with the decision-making process. And just kudos to you guys, because there's, people, not everybody takes avalanche courses, and there's so much uncertainty there in the snowpack that even the pros don't know. So increasing our margins of safety for recreationalists is just awesome, and pros alike. Kudos.
Yeah.
Turns out almost nobody takes avalanche courses when you look at the data.
Is that right?
Yeah. What is it, Jeff? It's like 5 million people play in the backcountry every year, and 20,000 or something take an Avy course.
Yeah.
So
in about
shocking.
300 years, we could get everyone educated at this rate.
That's a good rate.
It's about
that'll be super good.
90% of the public in avalanche terrain has not taken an avalanche course.
That's amazing.
That's super scary.
Give or take. It's kind of back of the envelope, but even if it's 90% has never taken an avalanche course, you're like, wow, this is the riskiest thing people are ever going to do. And I think that was one of the goals we were striving for, is like, hey, this tool doesn't exist. How can we give people a simple framework that's similar to the guides list, where, some of these meetings can be knockdown, drag out about what's our go, no go terrain for the day. And as it should be, because our lives depend on it at work. And I don't know how OSHA signs off on guiding.
I don't think they do.
Or ski patrol or anything to do with avalanches. My gosh, avalanche mitigation in any way. You're dealing with explosives, you're dealing with avalanches, and the most unpredictable, of course, is the people.
Right.
And, did I have my coffee? Did I poop yet? Did my dog die? Oh my gosh, all that changes how I, show up for morning meeting. Am I a conservative or aggressive mindset? And I think that's one thing that AspectAvy gives the recreational user is like, here is your run list. It's very simple. And that's maybe a misperception. We're not, as guides, whatever the setting, mechanized or human powered, we're not making the judgment on the fly because we have x-ray vision in the snow and my gut tells me the bull's going to be good. It's like, no. There's a whole season's backlog of tracking data, cataloging data. It's like accounting for snowflakes, basically. And that's what the Pro 2 is really about. And how do you share that data? How do you track the trends and then choose the terrain where you're going to avoid the problems and stay on the right side of the slope angle, the critical slope angle for the day, and then be like, okay, this is our green list, this is our red list. We cannot switch on the green light. Like that doesn't work. We can do it tomorrow, but I can't do it today. It's the Ulysses chained to the mast where you're like, I'm bound by this contract with my teammates and we're going to hash it out and we're going to hear everyone's opinion. And my God, I think we've all been in working environments where we're like, this is a dysfunctional team, or this is a highly functioning team where everyone's opinions respected, taken into account. And it's my obligation to speak up and be like, hey, I have a high degree of uncertainty about this. I think maybe we're going too aggressive today. I think we need more data. Let's do some explosives testing and let's find out. And then we'll greenlight it tomorrow.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly. There's so much background that goes into operational decision making or individual decision making as guides in a day that it's not seen on the front end when you're out guiding, for sure. And it's always great to have clients that are super curious and want to learn a lot about that.
Right. Like pull back the curtain and be like, how do you make the sausage back here anyway? Yeah.
And then around even recreational avalanche programs, we're out there, you dig pits and you're looking at the layers and testing all the fingers, hand hardness, and looking at crystals and doing all the tests and taking notes. And what your tool does is it helps remove that uncertainty about spatial variability. And when we're looking in the snow, it's a snow pit. That's one small piece of the puzzle in a vast slope that is often interconnected, that has terrain features that are variable, different bed surfaces. And so that little piece of information, although it gives us a lot of information as to like the structure of the snowpack, it doesn't tell us where we can trigger a slide. It doesn't tell us like if it is go or no go. But what I like about AspectAvy, it just like puts that all over all the terrain based on the slope angle and on the aspect and the elevation that the problems have been identified by the forecast. And then it lets us update that through our observations as we're traveling through the terrain with what we're feeling under our skis, rather than like stopping to dig a pit that gives us only just a little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that 1/1,000,000th of the slope size. My pit is so tiny. And I get the sense, and I just want to clear it up for the listeners. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like your intuition, your gut feeling, you use that to make more conservative decisions. But
yes,
do you use it to be like, ooh, my gut feels good. Let's go steep and deep today and go rowdy?
no, not so much. It's more
Good.
on the conservative side. When I get to the steep and deep, it's all data based and looking at the signs and the forecast and where I am in the terrain. Slope angle is a huge one. Aspect, elevation. I mean, all of that. Time of year, because the sun's interface with like different aspects depending on, the month of the year. It's either higher or lower. Is going to impact different slope angles and aspects.
Yep.
Can
Danny
I ask
Kahneman.
you? Can I ask you? Oh, sorry, Jeff. You're about to start talking about Danny Kahneman.
You know me. Let me just slip this in, and then you hit her up. He says our intuition is our subconscious processing faster than our conscious brain can catch up. And sometimes you're like, I don't know about this. I've just got a bad feeling. This doesn't feel right. Let's step back. This doesn't feel right. And oftentimes, I can't put my finger on it during the moment, but then we can talk it out later. I'm like, oh, that's what I was picking up, but I just couldn't. And you just put out a whole bunch of variables that as a professional, you're chewing on, your subconscious is chewing on and working overtime. That computer, it's hard to get it to turn off, especially when there's a big storm coming in and you've got clients, and it is just churning. And I think that's something to keep in mind as a beginner. We don't have that pattern recognition going on and those years in the field, because for a normal professional, it's 100 days in a team setting, logging data, making observations, tracking trends, debating vigorously in a group with experts. It's not just, oh, I feel good about this or I feel bad about it. And then sometimes it can be the opposite. It can be so simple. Like when you were in CB with Mike and we're out touring and we would get these rumbling collapses and my sphincter just tightens up and I go, eek! And it's like, my intuition says that's not good. And that's all I need to know. The earth just shook under our feet. I'm pretty sure that's a bad sign. Let's not ski anything steep today.
Yeah, we were on like a pretty flat ridge when that was happening.
Yeah. It was like flat terrain, and the whole earth just dropped underneath of us multiple times. I don't know, make 10, 11 collapses.
It was like a dozen.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to ask you something, because we're talking all about like risk and like, all these factors that you guys have taken effect. And I think, Jeff, you've also guided here. But when you go guide in Antarctica, how do you first off manage risk? Because I've never even been to Antarctica. I don't know. Like, that sounds extremely tricky because it's so remote. And then also, like, I'm assuming you're going in the summer, so it's mostly sunshine the whole time, right? And the sun's just circling around. Like, how do you manage?
It's spring, so it does get dark. Yep, there are night. It's early spring, so the days are getting longer and it's more mild. And we are on the Antarctic Peninsula, which is much more maritime than the continental, bitter cold mass of Antarctica. The peninsula sticks out and is, meets the Drake Passage. And so you have a lot of warm water, warmish water that's influencing the snowpack and the temperatures there.
So then,
how do you manage risk in Antarctica?
What is that like? Do you just have a heli on call, or what's the deal?
No. That's a great question, because it is a true adventure. So a lot of the risk of like getting there and deciding where we can go every day, that's the cruise ship operator. That's the expedition leader that is like at the helm with the pilot, the captain, deciding, like looking at maps of ice flows and where we can get into based on current ice, wind direction, tidal direction, all that kind of stuff. So the big picture of like getting there and crossing the Drake Passage, like that context is way beyond my pay grade.
Because that's literally one of the most dangerous places on Earth.
Throughout the whole Drake Passage, so I managed the risk of being seasick.
Pro move.
I'm a landlubber, but it's worth it. And then the penguins are definitely helpful in managing, like giving us indicators of like where we can get to shore, because we can land a Zodiac anywhere. The penguins can hop up onto shore, and that's always that's really why I go. It's for the penguins. So the
crew handles the risk until they get you on the ice.
That's right.
And then I must imagine it must be really challenging to on-site, because if I'm going to a glaciated place, so we got crevasses, seracs, so those are ice cliffs that can break off. We've got avalanches, potentially steep terrain where people could slide on corn snow into the ocean or get avalanched into the ocean. Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing, there's probably not the glaciers are probably changing rapidly and degrading like most places.
Mhm.
And you also have the added challenge of I can get regularly refreshed satellite imagery of the glaciers at any time of the year and track the trends of the crevasse field. So I'm like, oh, hey, we're definitely going to rope up for this zone, whereas this zone's a compression zone, and for the whole year there haven't been crevasses here. Do you have data like that, and how do you manage all those variables? My palms are getting sweaty.
Well,
There
yeah,
are so
and
many
also
variables.
like, sorry, I got one last thing. Like, if you have some place where like it literally never melts entirely, so like maybe I'm super ignorant here, help me out, but like, wouldn't there just be like an old snow problem constantly?
No, but that's a really, really good question. And there isn't there, where it's a maritime snowpack.
Oh,
You've
right.
got the glacier rather than the earth, which the glacier's colder. So you typically aren't getting depth hoar development. It's all ice, all the
Okay.
snow's falling on ice. And
There's
it's a
no
virtual
heat
desert.
from the core of the
Yeah.
earth. Yeah.
It's a virtual desert. Really, it doesn't snow that much in Antarctica. It just persists for a
Okay.
long time because it remains cold. So most of the problems that we're managing are, if it's a persistent problem, it's typically like a wind slab, which will last for a couple days, and those are pretty
Gotcha.
easily avoidable. But we're not, fortunately, managing old snow problems, because that would even increase the complexity of
So
the
all
decision.
those things we mentioned are easier to manage than the old snow problem on Red Mountain
Yes,
Pass in your backyard.
they are. It's
That's
unbelievable.
that is very
It's
telling.
amazing, But we manage the risk. Your question about the mapping. I mean, it's all on-site guiding, which is one of the most exciting things about guiding there, because there are no good maps, even paper maps. I mean, the scale is so large that you can't. It'd be like contour
Yeah.
lines would be like 200 meters apart. Just really very, very poor definition. And then the digital maps have. It's almost impossible to know exactly where you're going to go. So uploading maps to be offline is tricky, and they're just not well developed for
Yeah.
Antarctica yet, at least for the peninsula. So even though we do our best, we do track our tours, and then when we come back, say upload them to Gaia or another app, and then you'll have some terrain features that you can see. But still, it's very, very poor detail. So it's mostly on-site guiding, and it's mostly going to places that we've been before. So we have some terrain familiarity from a guiding perspective. But we always rope up. As soon as we get on shore, we put the rope on.
Yeah.
We guide in a team of 2 guides and 4 clients each, and we share a Zodiac getting to shore together. We have radio communication throughout the day. One team might go somewhere else, but we're always communicating, and we're kind of our little mini safety net. And then we also have safety in numbers, because there's 25 guides, and we don't always go to the same zones, but we have a pretty robust group of experienced guides for any rescue that would be necessary. We don't use helicopters, although there is some heli skiing going on down there now with some of
Wow.
these super yachts. And we, read the terrain as we're going up, roped up. And if the weather's bad, the guide out in front puts some wands in to mark the way and mark some crevasses.
Old school.
And
Right on.
it's awful if you have to wear the rope on the way down. It's very, very rare that you do. Skiing with a rope on is awful.
It's the
It has
best way
That
to
sounds
ruin
very
a
tricky.
friendship on the downhill.
Yeah, it's awful.
It's like the ultimate
when you're
marriage
going down,
test.
it's much easier to see the crevasses, and you come up that way so you know where they are. But oftentimes, that exposure to the sliding and falling into the ocean is real. And we do have corn spring and icy conditions oftentimes. So we always have boot crampons, and oftentimes we'll shoulder or put our skis on our pack, and then short rope our clients or set a fixed line up and down these exposed sections, unless we've got really skilled skiers. But that's oftentimes getting on and offshore is the crux, for sure.
Is that something where like get you to shore and then they peace out back to the boat, or they
Yeah.
stay on shore?
Yeah. Yeah, they're like running laps, dropping people off and picking another group up and taking them to another landing.
Whoa.
We always send a couple guides out before we go out with the clients to scout the landings. And oftentimes we have shovels and wands, and we'll put emergency gear there in case we would get stuck there, which has happened once where we had a hut. I was stuck with Andrew McLean and Doug Workman for probably about 4 hours. And fortunately, we had a hut before we were extricated by the ship, made a eddy from the wind, and they sent a Zodiac driver in to get us, and it was really dicey. We could have flipped that Zodiac easily, but that's very rare. But we always have emergency rations on shore, and good backup, good comms. And then, you can't always get out and ski. That's the goal, is to get out as much as possible. But some days it's just too rowdy.
Is there like a specific window of time that you're only allowed to do it there? Like you said, it's spring, so it does have a day and night cycle. Is that like a 3-month window basically that you're allowed to do that?
No, it's probably about a 2-month window. The trips that this company's starting to do is much earlier in the season. Now they're going in October. We generally were going in November. Once you get a little bit later, it's just you're dealing with an isothermal snowpack, and it just doesn't have enough structure and cold temperatures to support good skiing. That's when you go to go to see the penguins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering that. When I was reading
it's a trip of a lifetime. If any of you listening can afford it, it's definitely put that on your bucket list. It's a remarkable wilderness area.
Do any of those people need cameramen?
Yes, that's true.
And now would be an appropriate time. Angela, a lot of times people ask me like, hey, Jeff, could you recommend a mountain guide for me? And I got to say, I'm really fussy because there's a lot of very technically proficient mountain guides out there, but I'm also looking for someone with a low risk tolerance where I know the people are going to come back, and you're on my short list of people that I would recommend. And how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to go skiing or climbing with you? Because I know you do trips all over the world as well as locally right here in Colorado. What's the best way to hit you up?
Well, not Instagram or Facebook, because I don't respond to messages there. So don't
Good for
do
you.
that. Yeah. Email or my phone number. I think my phone number is on my website, which is very out of date. My website is alpinist007.com or angelahawse.com, and you can find me there, and you'll find my email address, and that's the best way to reach out to me for sure. Thanks for that.
I got to say, you might have the best email address I've ever come across.
The 007?
Yeah, that was back in the day when of course, I wanted alpinist.mac.com, but that was taken. So I'm like, I love it. A huge James Bond fan. So,
and I love the irony of like, if you think back to like, the old classic misogynistic Bond movies. So it's just perfect that you repurposed that. You're like, I'm taking it back.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'll let people surf to your website there, and then they can check out what your email is. It's pretty good. Hey, you started me thinking with Dave's questions on how do you manage the risk in Antarctica. And one thing that I've been curious about, and I think there's a gaping hole in the guiding industry, is we talk about risk management and we talk a bit about risk tolerance, but I've never worked for an operation that said, hey, this is our risk tolerance. And what I mean is, I was talking to a guide at our annual AMGA meeting, and he works for a heli operation way up north. And they used to have a tongue-in-cheek motto that said, it's okay to take a ride as long as nobody dies. And that was what was told to clients. And I was like, whoa, wow. I wish I had those superhero powers to be like, oh, this will only be a D1 and it's a high risk clientele and they're okay blowing an ACL, but nobody is going to get buried or no one's going to get pushed off a cliff. And they've since rethunk that after an incident where one of their team was killed. And they're like, okay, it's not okay to take a ride anymore. And that really got me thinking. And I've asked my brother, who's also a guide and friend of yours and colleague, and he's working up at CMH this year. And I was like, oh, tell me about your training, your orientation going in. And it seems like it's something that's not really articulated in the guiding industry of, are we okay with, I could imagine a spectrum of somewhere between hangnail all the way up to mass fatality, worst case scenario, where everyone in the group dies. And there's this huge gray area of what is our risk tolerance. And then we start throwing in minors, kids under 18. And you're like, whoa, this is getting really tricky. We are making decisions for their parents who are ignorant of the risk involved, who are deciding whether their kids are going to be involved in this activity as well. And when I say ignorant, that's not condescending. It just means they're naive. They don't have that depth of experience where we've lost tons of friends and colleagues, and we very well are aware of what could happen if things go wrong. And that weighs very heavily on us a lot when we're deciding what our run list is for today. So that was a bit of verbal diarrhea, but you've been grappling with operational risk management and you're about to teach it. So what are some of the questions that you've grappled with? I'm not expecting like a silver bullet of here's the answer, Jeff, I've got it figured out. But I'm just curious about, you've been head of an organization that could be called the largest guiding operation in the US. And there's a huge amount of risk exposure when you're having students be on the sharp end of the rope leading or guiding. And it's like, whoa, how do we manage risk in that operational setting versus heli guiding versus in Antarctica? You've done it all. So lay it on us. What are some of your thoughts or questions?
It's all in the gut. It all comes from the gut, Jeff. No.
That's why it's really important to drink lots of kombucha. You want to keep that gut flora happy.
That's right.
Probiotics is key.
No, I mean, that's a big question, and you're absolutely right. I think it's not articulated well, and the avalanche industry is evolving. So we are starting to develop more criteria around what is acceptable and what isn't. And again, as we talked about earlier, it's going to be different for like a mine that you're going to be driving in a vehicle that you're the size of an avalanche that's acceptable to hit the road, considering someone's in a vehicle and wearing avalanche transceivers and has rescue gear and radio comms, is going to be much higher than it would for backcountry operation where your resources are much more limited. You're on foot. You don't have maybe communication at all with the outside world. So, but yeah, I think it's pretty generally understood that we don't expose ourselves or guests to an avalanche that could produce the size that would bury and kill a person, which is a size 2, a D2, destructive size 2 avalanche. And that's not even that big of an avalanche, really, that can produce that much debris. And if you consider that there might be a terrain trap that could multiply the debris, the depth, then that makes it even worse. But it has, I would say, certainly amongst ski patrollers, been acceptable to ski cut size 2 terrain, which is, I think the culture could take a step back and reevaluate that a bit. Because you are exposing workers to something that could produce a slide that could potentially kill someone. And where that slide's going to release, above or below, and a ski cut, visibility, there's a lot of factors there that have been fairly accepted by that industry. Not all ski areas are like that. Some have much smaller tolerances. They might say, we're not going to ski cut on any terrain that could produce a size 1.5. And then again, how we interpret the size of an avalanche is a whole nother ball of wax. My D2 might be a D1.5 to you, you know? So there's so many factors there. But I think in the ski guiding realm, we've gotten comfortable with smaller avalanches like size 1, D1 that could produce an avalanche, but isn't going to result in a fatality necessarily unless there is some magnifier involved. But it isn't well articulated. I think our run lists in the morning kind of get at that, but we don't necessarily articulate that consistently in the industry. It's a good point.
Okay, hold up. I got to ask this question because I feel like I'm just like hearing this for the first time. Did you just like, are you guys saying that there's no like global standardization for risk threshold for any guiding operation? It's per.
No.
It doesn't exist.
Yes. No, that's wrong. Yes, there is. Like for a highway, like CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, they're going to shut down the highway if a size, a D3 avalanche could hit the road potentially and, you know, bury and destroy a car. So yes, in some industries, there are consistencies. I don't know if that's the same in Europe as it is in US and if it's the same in Canada, but, you know.
Some nuances with legal system where if I'm a mountain guide in Europe and let's say I'm in Italy, if it's considerable or high danger and I have an accident and my client dies, I'm automatically convicted of manslaughter. Because what's the definition of considerable danger?
Yep.
It's human triggered avalanche.
Likely.
And the judge is like, why were you going there? And I'm like, well, I didn't think it was going to slide. And they're like, that's right. You didn't think. Your sole job, your prime directive is to bring them home alive, even if they have to double pull down that low angle slope. But, you know, and I've had colleagues in Europe, 3, who have that. You know, they lost a client at considerable or high danger, and the judge threw the book at him and said, hey, the law is the law. And you were an avalanche terrain at considerable danger. And if you got it wrong, you're going to pay the consequences. And it's an interesting way of thinking at it. And I think what we're seeing now in the rash of close calls, it's interesting, like looking at the CAIC or the Utah Avalanche Centers, you know, like here's our summary for the last month. And it's like 100 skier triggered avalanches and no fatalities until just recently. And you're like, oh my gosh, we're really getting lucky because it's been a very unstable year. An inordinate number of high danger days and considerable days speaks to the instability we've had in snowpack, yet very few fatalities. We're way behind the seasonal average for deaths. And I would say we're getting pretty lucky in that regard because lots of people aren't getting the message, like in Italy, or if I had an accident in Germany or Switzerland, Austria, they'd run it through an algorithmic approach that they're trained in and said, hey, Jeff, you were in the red and you're going to suffer the consequences. I'm sorry. And it's a very different way of thinking, but I think, you know, you, Mike Hatchup, and I were all on the same page. Hey, it's considerable. It's been at considerable for days, except when it was at high. We are staying out of avalanche terrain and keeping it super chill. And it was such a relief because I felt a little stress as the local hosting you to provide the goods because you've been working and driving and doing clinics and you're like, hey, we need to play. And I'm like, I do too. And then I was so relieved that we were all on the same page and we're just like, yeah, we're just going to keep it chill. And we had such fun skiing and I was not stressed once. It was such a relaxing day. It was great.
A great day.
Which, when you're skiing with a group of 5 that you've never skied before, that never happens. And it was really lovely to do that, share that. Yeah.
And
Jeff, you can always blame it on me. I have all the camera gear. Just be like, Dave's a rock. He can't get caught, dude.
He's gonna stick.
You know, that part of that decision making was anywhere it was steep, we were skiing on a crust. So there was not a persistent weak layer underneath. And we also skied some steeper terrain in old growth forest. And it was heavily anchored. Lots of tree bombs had hit that. I don't want to reveal any secrets here, but it was an amazing stash that we were able to ski because of those two factors where you chose to take us.
Yeah, and I would I would be pedantic on one point. If we dug around those base of the old growth forest, I think we're going to find sugar around the trees, but I don't think it's so much acting as rebar and concrete to anchor the slope that we might see that in a maritime snowpack where it's all pencil or knife hard. But I think what it does is it's so disruptive.
Right.
It's such a thick forest that only experts can ski through, and all those massive tree bombs. I'm psyched we didn't get hit by any, because some of those craters were like something you'd see on the moon, right? It's like a 50-pound boom. I'd be like, oh, I got to go to the chiropractor if I survived. And it disrupts the weak layer. So you just don't have a continuous weak layer. And it's a very localized spot, because there's certainly areas where you're like, oh, hey, let's go ski in the trees. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Is it an open glade that an intermediate could ski? You're like, oh, that's not enough disruption of the weak layer. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great day out. Really enjoyed getting out with you guys.
Yeah, it's fun to ski with people in the same mindset so that it's really relaxed. I'm over that point.
My ski partners are either guides or folks that have been around the block a long time and have lived to ski another day.
Yeah, my list is very short. I'm quite particular. Yeah.
Me too.
I feel honored to be on both of your lists.
Oh, you're fun to ski with.
Well, we should probably wrap this up, because we've taken up a lot of Angela's time. It's been very nice of you to hang out with us. But Angela, I wanted to ask kind of just like a final question to you, which would be like, is there something that you see like clients or normies like me, just like people consistently doing in the backcountry, that you're just like face palming and you're just like, how is this not getting across? Like, how are people, like, if there isn't, that's great. But
it's really, I think, not that much really, which is impressive. But the one thing that I do see people struggle with is layers, and being comfortable and not sweating on the up and then being cold on the down without having to take off your top layer and all that. And I guess, that often is influenced by your pace. So if you're sweating a lot, one, you probably have too many clothes on, and two, you're probably going way too fast for your body and your comfort level. But I seem to be able to just like trudge along most of the day on a tour wearing pretty light underneath, and then my shell. And I have nice pit zips, and I can open the front, and I seem to be able to do that. And then I'll put on a down jacket over top of that shell. When I stop, maybe I'll leave it on for the down, or maybe just take it off, because I'm generating a lot of heat going down as well. So it's managing those layers and keeping your core warm enough that your hands aren't and toes aren't getting cold, because once you start sweating and you cool down, your hands and toes are going to start to suffer. So yeah, layering's a science.
Layering
is key.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to hear yours.
Yeah.
From an avalanche perspective, it's what we've seen in all the close calls and accidents that have happened in our zones, in the San Juans and here in Crested Butte in the West Elks, is that it's considerable danger with an old snow problem, and people are skiing steep terrain. So that's over 30 degrees, black diamond terrain. And the last part is they're skiing exactly in the blacked out critical danger zones. And you can get away with it for a while, but eventually it will catch up to you. And that's a very hard lesson that I had to learn, because I thought I was outsmarting it. And I was in the snowpack every day, and I had my finger on the pulse until I didn't, and I got it wrong. And I was lucky enough to be okay. But I've just lost too many friends and colleagues who were super experts. Mm-hmm. And it's not that they weren't really highly trained. It's just that the world is a really unpredictable place. And if we're going out there so many times, it's going to catch up with us or one of our friends very quickly. And my wish for the backcountry community is, hey, watch out for those ingredients. Considerable old snow problem, going where the blacked out critical danger zones are and going over 30 degrees. That's a recipe for trouble. And I wish all of my backcountry travelers in the community to have a long and adventurous life instead of a short, exciting life.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's great.
Amen on that one.
Amen on that one. Well said. And I can ask you guys a question, can't I?
Yeah, hit us up.
Yeah, this is for both of you. So, you're not spring chickens anymore. You're a little been around the block, both of you. Actually, I have two questions, but this one for both of you is like, what would you tell your 20-year-old self about risk and decision making? Because I know, Dave, I don't know you as well, but Jeff, I know that you in the past your risk tolerance was probably higher than it is now. And what have you learned since you've been 20 that you'd look back and tell your 20-year-old self now?
Jeff,
Dave, you want to take it first?
Sure.
Or do you want me to?
Well,
Okay,
Angela, I spent my 20s skiing slopestyle and half pipe. So like, it's actually kind of funny. I feel like I have a really strange relationship with risk. There's like a really, really narrow part of my life where I'm comfortable taking extreme risk, which is skiing park, like, or resort skiing, because I'm like, I've done more of that than anything else, period. But because of that, and you can talk to my wife about this, she's like always complaining, like I drive like a grandma. I'm like a pretty conservative biker. Like, and then skiing, I love hanging out with people like you in the backcountry because I learn so much, and it really teaches me about, like, shows me all the things that I don't know consistently, or just am not thinking about, even though I've heard it, I haven't retained it. And so I think it's funny when you're like, what would I tell my 20-year-old self is like about risk? Like, that's a really hard question because I feel like fortunately I've had a pretty good relationship with it, I would say, outside of the like park skiing. I think I've done enough maybe stuff that I knew I wasn't good at, and then it like spanked me and I was like, oh yeah, duh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, but I would say like keep learning. I would tell myself to like stay curious and keep learning and like try to absorb as much knowledge from those around you as possible, which I feel like we're kind of doing here with this, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
What do you think, Jeff?
For me, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where John Cleese put it really well. He's like, stupid people have no idea how stupid they're being when they're doing stupid things. And we just don't know what we don't know. And so if we're a novice at something, we think we got it. And I was just surfing this week and I thought I had it, paddled in, caught the wave. It was overhead. And I was like, oh my God, I'm really doing this. Get to shore. I'm celebrating with my mate. He loses control of his board. I'm looking the other way. The board whacks me in the head, concussion. I'm fucking down. And that was the perfect metaphor where, I had this little taste of what I perceived as mastery, which is ludicrous, right? Because I don't know how to surf. But I got lucky, blind squirrel finds the nut kind of deal. And I was like, woo, I figured it out. And the universe just smacked me aside the head and like, listen, this is infinitely complex. And the experts, the absolute experts, don't have it figured out. And that's the same way in the avalanche game. And I thought I had it figured out. And I was just on the cusp of basic proficiency. No, in fact, not even. and so you're on the peak of Mount Stupid and you get the smackdown and you're in the valley of despair. And then hopefully the line up on the graph is tracking your proficiency with your perception of where I am. And I wish I had a better gauge. But actually, that's something that AspectAvy gives me is, when we looked at our tour track afterwards, I'm like, did we stay out of the red or, did we take any high risk moves? And it forces me to confront that And I can't just go by, it felt good because our skiing felt great. We were having so much fun. But, I have to look at it hard and fast and be like, oh, did we cross into the red? Okay, why? And what are we going to do next time? So we make sure that we have a low risk tour over and over. So I think that was it. It's just like, hey, that overconfidence when you're new at something, you just setting yourself up for get blindsided by the surfboard in the head.
That's great.
Dude, so many times that's happened to me, and I'm like, why do I never learn? Like, this isn't everything's
Chris
different.
hit you in the head with his board too?
Yes. No, but like, dude, he's everywhere. No, I remember surfing in Costa Rica and being like my first big bail off the board, like went in fully open, like mouth open, like didn't tuck and roll at all, like literally got sand in my mouth and was like came out like, and like, it was just like my buddy is there. He's like, dude, like number one rule when you bail off a board is like getting a ball, like tuck and roll, like, and I'm like, oh, duh. Right. That because
I actually didn't know that.
Like,
now you know.
but I was just like, oh, like, I don't know, man. I agree with you. There's so much stuff out there that you just don't know about that you got to just approach everything very humbly.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so fun about doing something with the beginner's mind is like, oh, I don't have to be the expert and feel that pressure of knowing it all. And I can just be open to being like, hey, tell me what I'm doing and what I need to change and like, give me feedback. It's a really kind of fun place to be. And it's funny because like, I can only imagine how when I'm looking at people doing what I think is like really far out stuff skiing where I'm like, whoa, I'm sure people were laughing at me all week at the beach. Just like, man, that guy.
If he survives another week,
it'll be a miracle. And I'm like, how many people did I cut off and not even know?
That's awesome.
That's good.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for hanging out.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and I think this is a hard one. This is back to our operational wristband, our risk tolerance, and something that's very interesting, more so in the high altitude mountaineering world, is risk tolerance and how that's different for gender. In the past, women who have gone away to climb 8,000 meter peaks or very technical undertaking have often been heavily criticized if
Double
they have
standard
for taking that level of risk, which culturally is deemed unacceptable for a woman, whereas many, many more men have that have kids have taken those risks, and the public hasn't been very condemning.
They totally give them a pass.
Great, good job. And I just, wonder what your all's perception of that, and is if we're going to see a shift, and it's just also like goes to like the risk that we're going to take as citizens of the U.S. to not vote. Like I just talked to a friend the other day. It's like, oh, I never vote. Yeah, I don't do politics. I'm like, oh my God, like how many people do I know might not vote that I don't even know they're not going to vote? I mean, what a risk is that going in? And it's just, I don't know what it is, complacency or thinking that our voice doesn't matter.
It'll all work out.
It'll all work out. We'll deal with it as it comes. This is super interesting. But back to the risk tolerance on, high altitude mountaineering, and a woman's place is maybe not there culturally acceptable. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
That's really interesting. Like I've never really, like, at least for me, that thought has literally never crossed my mind of like, if a woman is going and doing something extreme, like to me, like if some lady wants to go free solo El Cap, that in my mind is the same level as nutso as Alex Honnold doing it. Like I don't have a base layer of judgment towards their decision making, but that's a really interesting kind of like thought. I don't know. I didn't think about that before, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's something. It's definitely a real thing. And And who are those that are judging? Are they climbers? Are they just people who are reading about it in the media? I seem to think that it's probably not as much the climbers as it is the general public. But it's just an interesting, since our conversations evolved a lot around risk tolerance. That's something that comes back to me because I live in that high altitude climbing world, and to have a community there, and it's challenging for women.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard for me to reflect, because if you wrote a formula, our variance over time equals our bias. And if I have a bias, it's unconscious. I'm not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really tricky to start with. And then how I consume the news. And I think of two distinct stories that are similar: the Hillary O'Neill and Alex Lowe, and how those tragedies were portrayed. And there's a strong family component in each of them.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to filter through my bias and then the media bias that's informing me. But I definitely got the sense, and it didn't sit with me well, that it seemed like the perception was that the risk Hillary was taking is not socially acceptable, but the risks Alex Lowe was taking were socially acceptable. That was the feeling I got.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that different?
Yeah, that's the feeling I've had with a number of women that have unfortunately passed in the mountains. Yeah. And a mother's relationship to children is different, but it's still, it shouldn't be that different. It shouldn't be that it's culturally unacceptable for a woman to do something that is exactly the same as a man's willing to do as well. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I'll leave you at that with food for thought, and how we evolve as a culture moving forward with high levels of risk and uncertainty all around us. And thank you guys for AspectAvy. I mean, this is just an amazing undertaking and a risk that you are embarking on that is just, it's high level. It's financial risk, social risk, litigation risk. I mean, all this. It's like it's a bold undertaking, and I applaud you both for, especially you, Jeff, with your investment and your visionary just thought process in moving this forward, because it's not. You need a lot of resources to pull this off, and somehow you've managed to put together an amazing team.
Thanks, Angela. And I definitely, there's no way we could do it without the backing of the community, and the backcountry community has been incredibly supportive of it, and people like you as well, and lending your voice to it. And, but then, everyone who's been involved and contributed in the project, giving us feedback, investing, and helping us with our team, like Dave, who handles all our product or content production and videography and podcasting. So it's definitely a team effort, but, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I look forward to watching it evolve and grow.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely mortified that we couldn't get the pro code for you to work, because you were one of the earliest testers and it glitched the system. So you actually bought it out of your own pocket.
I did. Yesterday morning, I purchased it before I went up Red 3.
I got to say is the ultimate testimonial when the president emeritus of the Guide Association buys the app out of her own pocket, who gets everything for free. So
right.
Dinner's on me. Dinner's on me next time.
No, I was happy to contribute. And I used it, and it was great. It kept me out of the red.
Okay.
Heck yeah.
You guys are great.
Right.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah,
it was awesome hanging with you. See ya.
Bye.
Yeah, you too. See you again.
Thank you so much for listening to All Aspects. If you like what we're doing here, please leave a rating and a review. It really is the best way to help others find the show. Thanks again to our business daddy, AspectAvy, for making this show possible. To learn more about how AspectAvy is making avalanche safety simple, go to AspectAvy.com. If you want to use this powerful new tool on your next backcountry adventure, simply download the app from the App Store and enjoy 30 days free on them. Lastly, a special thanks to IceLab for helping us produce this show. You guys rock, and we couldn't do it without you. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the backcountry.